one of the questions that was brought up there in that video was a demonstration of the innovations that Glencore is undertaking, but that question of what if. So I'd like to kind of switch our minds over to this side of the equation now, which is the Albert Einstein part of this problem, which is figuring out what are the answers to those what if questions. And a lot of those answers are being undertaken by our next panelist, who is going to speak on behalf of his work and his colleagues. And I assure you there are a lot of neurons at work at Laurentian University. I've seen the presentation, it's fantastic. So I'd like to introduce and pass the floor to Dr. John Gunn from the Living with Lakes Center at Laurentian University and the Canada Research Chair to demonstrate to us some of the great work that they're doing and the importance of the educational and research institutions in Northern Ontario and Canada for addressing the circular economy. John, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and I'll see if I can share the video first. Thank you very much. I do too recognize my location here within the Robinson-Huron Treaty and Tecumseh and Anishinaabeg and Wahnapitae First Nations traditional territories. Today I'm going to try to represent our a larger research community that's operating in our case history study site, and for this particular presentation we'll be using Sudbury, the largest city in northeastern Ontario, as an example. But Sudbury is known across the whole world now as one of the great examples of wise investment in environmental improvements, and it's becoming a model for the rest of the world. So I'll take that in perspective. And Dr. Nathan Basilikos helped me with ideas around land, and Nadia Mikachuk around microbial solutions. And I'm showing you an award-winning building where we work, the LEED Platinum building. It's probably only LEED Platinum building in northeastern Ontario. And inside of it, you can see what possibly the future might be in the use of wood. This building won the Design with Wood competition for Ontario, and might be the impetus for creating a new type of lumber industry for the future. Because if you look at it, it is not just a building, it is 180 tons of stored carbon. And probably in many ways a safer place to store carbon than in the trees surrounding the building, as Dr. Bota mentioned the fire issue. One enormous product that we produce in research centers such as this is people and young people. So we're really needing to produce the critical thinkers of the future. And they have to have elite science communication skills, the fake news that we hear and the alternate facts. We can't tolerate those in a challenging world. And we need young people to be innovators. And I'm proud that we're producing some ourselves at this elite research center. It has the only graduate program in science communication beyond the undergraduate level in all of Canada. But we enter by June 5th this year is the announcement of the UN Decade of Restoration and the severe crisis the world is facing. And Sudbury has to be brought forth as an example where transformation was thought impossible, but proved to be possible. And what we're looking at is a landscape that has changed, and we're looking at the potential values that have been generated now out of this landscape. And making the transformation affects the costs of water treatment, the importance of carbon sequestration. From an industry perspective, it's reduction of liability insurance. And as Peter just mentioned, waste repurposing is very important here. So let's put our hats on as ecologists and look at this landscape from ecological principles. First, the importance of this site. This was the world's largest point source of sulfur dioxide on Earth, at 2.5 million tons in 1960. To put that in perspective, all of China today produces about 10 million tons per day. this was a bigger source than much of Europe is today. So, and to see, as Peter mentioned, air emissions reduced by 99% is a fabulous accomplishment for Sudbury, that we now need to turn to the greenhouse gas and other environmental issues. People can get this figure in detail later, but with clean air, there's been a whole timeline. It's maybe correlation rather than causation, but I don't think we would have created a film festival. We wouldn't have built science centers. We wouldn't have, in fact, won the Nobel Prize in physics or created Canada's happiest city in the Sudbury of 1960. But as emissions declined, communities evolved to invest in other things. And this is what's going to be the future. As we invest in pollution controls, we open up the opportunities for investment in social and other community benefits. Peter already showed this tremendous accomplishment at one of the smelting companies, Glencore. But to me, this is really proof of the Michael Porter hypothesis that good government, good and well-crafted regulations can spur innovation and create the opportunity for industries to deal with the pollution problem and also become profitable and modernize. And I present this figure in other parts of the world, and it's always a really high impactful figure for other countries to see that it doesn't mean a clean company means we lose an industry. So let's take a naturalist point of view and an ecology point of view and look at what is our best example of an ultimate zero waste circular economy, nature. There's no waste in nature, it's completely reused and to the betterment of all of us, as Dr. Bota mentioned. So what is it in nature that we should highlight? Well, there's the rejuvenation issues, there's connectivity, and there's continuous nutrient and elemental cycling. So how would we see those principles expressed in a human system? Well, let's take the example of Sudbury and ask the question, and we're stuck in a terrible pandemic right now and a terrible crisis, but can disturbance rejuvenate a city? How do we respond to catastrophe? And I think we've got to respond quickly. Well, let's look at Sudbury's catastrophes of the past. We were hit by a meteorite. We were ground down by glaciers. We produced a very polluting industry, and now we're impacted by mining. What did the meteorite impact produce? One of the greatest ore bodies on Earth, where most of the metals that we're discussing now for the e-economy exist. What did the glaciers produce? They produced the city of lakes that create the opportunities that natural systems provide. And now we have to rethink our forest industry. IKEA, or Sweden doesn't send out raw fiber and wood. They send out IKEA furniture. And we've got to start manufacturing in Northern Ontario and send out high quality products out of our industry. In the same way that the mining industry is now ready to not only recycle, but to produce the essential metals for the e-economy going forward. Just to show, if we start to think about the connectivity of systems, my own example of improving the land has so many downstream benefits. And here's some examples from the United Nations award-winning regreening program in Sudbury, where 4,000 volunteer kids and others have regreened the land. Or the industries have jumped in and developed technologies for remote treatment of land. But what we see downstream is enormous improvements in the water quality in lakes and streams, and the return to sensitive species now responding to the upstream benefits of land reclamation. Just a surprising one as we face climate change. It won't solve all the problems, but there's always a battle over whether trees are enough to do the work of the climate challenge. But at least I'll give you a couple examples in Sudbury where trees are doing phenomenal things that we didn't think they could do. Yes, as Gary mentioned, the climate is warming in Sudbury. But as the community invested in growing trees and regreening those barren landscapes, we've reduced the surface winds in Sudbury Lakes by 35% by the drag on the land of forests. And the export from the forests of organic matter has changed the color and composition of lakes to the point, first, that the warming effect of winds don't penetrate to the bottom of the lakes. And the shading effects of the organic matter, I call it forest tea, protects the bottom waters. So strangely enough, today, 40 years after I started working in Sudbury, in spite of the climate warming, the average overall temperature of lakes is less in a treed community than in a barren community. And cold water species like the lake trout in the student's hand here are now able to return to downtown Sudbury, where they've been missing 50 years ago. No, of course, we can't sustain this if we allowed that temperature to continue to rise. But for a time, investing in nature shows some immediate benefits. The argument in Canada and around the world is, should we plant 1 billion trees or 1 trillion trees? And just a reminder where carbon is actually stored in trees. Only 20% of it is stored in the living tree itself, and only stored there for the life of that tree. About 20% in a typical forest is lying in dry, dead wood. And I would argue that that wood should best be used in the construction industry rather than laying on the ground with 20%. The vast majority of the soil, the carbon, is stored in the soil beneath the forest, and the trees are constantly enriching the soil with carbon. And we're facing globally a tremendous soil crisis where soil is being degraded. So if we have to invest, we have to invest first in soil. So in an industrial landset, if soil is the foundation for a healthy ecosystem, can we repair this broken foundation that we've created here? And yes, there is technologies being developed. More is needed in treating soil with various industrial waste materials that are waste to one company, but essential to other companies. So for instance, paper sludge and wood ashes and human biosolids, sewage sludge, is of huge value in the restoring of vast amounts of damaged industrial land. And in time, creating biofuels growing on those. Featuring the understory of trees, for instance, the middle picture where the fellow's carrying bread baskets of plants. That is recycling the ground cover of the bypass, the new highway. And instead of just bulldozing that material, the understory plants that are so difficult to establish in mining areas are hand transported into damaged areas and allowed to nucleate that site. On the right-hand side, looks like snow today, but it's really lichens. And this is the direct and indirect effect of air quality. Lichens, as anyone sees growing on rocks, is the beginning of forest soil. And they can't grow in polluted air. So as Sudbury has cleaned up its air, the natural soil building process of lichens is now returning to the area, showing how nature can help if you first deal with the pollution source. There's no sense doing any of this work if you first don't reduce the pollution. There's no solution without the old idea of diluting pollution. Makes no sense anymore. We have to just stop pollution. But we have left the world with critical needs. There isn't enough land to support the human population, and it's then a terrible crisis to leave land in a degraded state. We can't make any progress in leaving vast areas of land in a degraded state. And in northeastern Ontario, we have about 20,000 hectares of land left in the form of abandoned and active aggregate pits. And as another speaker mentioned, an enormous problem of abandoned mine sites, and 5,000 abandoned mine sites where it's on the public purse to deal with. These can be converted into products like solar farms or used for growing biofuel crops better than wasteland. Forest products, we've mentioned cellulose, carbon credits, fiber, lumber, biomass energy, and plywood. But the new industry of building out of wood, permission is now being granted to build taller and taller buildings that are fireproof, 6 stories, 13 stories, but they need massive timber produced by cross-laminated timber. And the first cross-laminated timber plant in Ontario was developed in St. Thomas last year. Quebec has opened theirs. We need this type of modern manufacturing capabilities in northeastern Ontario. I'll just wrap up with some estimates. The city of Sudbury is doing a great job trying to get to their ultimate goal after they declared a climate emergency of being net zero in 2050. But with every business as usual modernization effort they can get, the 1.3 million tons of CO2 per year we can only make modest changes. Under the most strenuous efforts of the climate emergency, we might get to 30 or so % reduction. Trees are a solution, but there's no solution without the full elimination of fossil fuel use in a city like Sudbury by 2050. We have to aggressively become fossil fuel free in these next 30 years. Final one is acid mine drainage, the famous picture by Ed Bertinsky. You look at that as industrial waste and acid mine drainage. Another way to look at it is the fantastic opportunity that Aaron mentioned. This is really the work of, should actually be considered life in its bountiful state. These are ancient life forms, the sulfate reducing bacteria, looking for alternate energy sources in the form of iron and liberating copper and nickel and a multitude of other metals as a byproduct of their energy metabolism. If we stand on top of the Copper Cliff tailings, a massive tailings, one of the largest in North America, and now analyze it, there are $7.8 billion approximately of nickel left in that tailings. Could we build an engineered microbial industry that could harvest this and recycle this back into the economy? There's other fantastic things that the new biotech industries can also look for, and that is to go into the extreme environments of metal sites and look for hardy organisms like the algae that are best at producing biofuels. And this researcher is also finding very promising pharmaceuticals in the algae and other life forms that can survive in these extreme environments that might be very soon released as cancer drugs. And finally, ideas are amalgamating around in northeastern Ontario around the idea of building a new industry related to these biotech solutions to the mine waste. So Dr. Nadia Mikachuk is currently working on a large proposal of building a Center for Mine Waste Biotechnology in northeastern Ontario that can generate some of these products and some of these solutions in the mining area, and create incubators of education, training, and profitable industries. And they're at the early feasibility study now, and you can follow up with Nadia on where this industry is going to grow. So this is an image I'll finish with, and it's looking at Sudbury again from a different perspective of what will it be in the 2050. And the great global thinker and designer, Bruce Mao, who is a product of Sudbury. Bruce works for all the big advertising companies of the world. He looks at Sudbury as the future is a resource management city within a park, that we build the park and live within a park and live with clean industries all at the same time. We see that mining, if done properly, can have footprints the size of a Walmart parking lot. We have to start producing our own food within in this landscape. There's no reason that we can't do sustainable forestry within a city. And similarly, running biomining and using reactors biological reactors to separate waste. And then we lost the rights to carbon storage credits, but it might come back, that this area could be where other countries and other industries will want to invest in carbon credits. But carbon storage itself is a real important purpose for industrially damaged lands. So I thank you for the opportunity to speak to you and bring some of these ideas of what industrial city could look like in 2050.
Okay, Chimigwech, John, much appreciated. Your lived experience always is a pleasure to listen to, and bringing back your respected research in these territories and across Canada. We trust that you will pass this knowledge along, and I know that as a professor with the university and as the research chair, your efforts are pinnacle in ensuring that our younger leaders have access to this knowledge so that they continue this fine work. So Chimigwech, for your presentation today, much appreciated. I would now like to call upon Ana Belén Sanchez, who is joining all of us from Madrid, Spain. I would like to give her the floor. Anna is a Green Job Specialist from the United Nations International Labor Organizations, and she's going to provide some remarks on labor as it relates to the circular economy.